Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how to make these beautiful crepe paper buttercups. For every flower that you'd like to make, you're going to need some yellow crepe paper, some green crepe paper, some wire. You could use pretty much whatever wire you have at hand. I bought these from my local hardware store, from Bunnings. And you basically get these in two different gauges. You're going to need a copy of the template that you'll need for the flowers, the petals. You'll find the link to the template for the buttercup in the description box below. For each flower, you're going to need 2 leaves cut in green, 5 petals cut in yellow, and for the center, you're going to need a little rectangular piece like this, again cut in yellow. Or you could use some artificial flower stamens like this. You're also going to need some floral tape, you're going to need a pair of wire cutters, you're going to need pliers, a pair of scissors, and some glue. Okay, so I'm going to quickly run you through how I decide the length of the wire that I'm going to need. You're basically going to need one, let's say about 9-inch piece of wire. This should be ideally a slightly thicker gauge of wire. That's what you're going to use for your stem. Since you're making a slightly longer stem, you want something that's going to be sturdy enough to hold your flower up or bend to whatever position you want without just flopping all over the place. You're also going to need a few pieces of wire. This is the thinner wire to use for the petals and the leaves. So each petal and leaf is propped up with one little piece of wire like this. What I normally do is you take your regular long length of wire. Okay, I'm going to try and find where the end is. All right, there we are. You take your template or a piece that you've already cut out, in this instance the petal. You measure approximately how long that petal is, and I'm going to leave, I'll say about maybe an inch more. Yeah, this inch is what you'll need to, or what we're going to use rather, to tie the flower together. Then using a pair of wire cutters, snap that off. And since this wire has been wound tightly, when you cut it off, it's still going to be a little bent. To make it easier to use, we're just going to sort of straighten it up and then mold it into the shape that we need later. Now, for the 2 leaves, I've got 2 pieces of wire over here. I'm going to cut a thin strip of my crepe paper roll. What I'm using here is a double-sided roll of crepe paper. Like you can see, it's a slightly lighter green on one side, a dark green on the other side. So adds a little bit of variety to the end product. All right? So I don't want to waste a whole bunch of it. I'm just going to snip it off on one fold and cut out a thin strip. Just like that. Now, because my paper is double-sided, I should be able to split this. Let's see. Sometimes you may need a little pin, a needle, or the wire might work for you to just get that first bit apart. And there you have it. You should simply be able to pull the 2 layers of paper apart. Don't discard any, even though they're a slightly different color. You could always use it for something later on. Similarly, I'm going to cut a little length off the yellow paper. Now, if you're using regular crepe paper, obviously you leave that step out. Just cut thin strips like this of the regular crepe paper and you're good to go. Now, we're going to prep these up, right? So the wire for the stem, the 9-inch piece, the thick wire, we're going to keep aside. Let's start work with the 2 little pieces of wire for the leaves. All right, you're going to need some glue. Okay. Dip one end of the wire in the glue. There we are. You don't want too much, just a little bit. Since this is the one we're going to use for the stem, we're going to wrap the wire to make it look more natural, not like an artificial leaf with a silver wire attached. It's going to look more realistic than that. All right? Holding the strip of paper at an angle, I'm going to cover the top. Nice and neat. All right? And then, with the strip in my right hand and holding the tip of the wire with my left, I'm going to start rolling. Notice that the strip is at an angle, and that's what I'm going to continue doing. You can add a dab of glue just to make sure that it holds on to the paper, to the wire. The paper holds on to the wire and doesn't slip off. But then again, you don't need too much, and you keep twirling till you reach the end. Now when you reach the end, don't just stop here. Continue till you go to the bottom, and I find the most effective way is just keep twisting and it just comes right off. All right? Let's see that again. Take the second piece that you'll need for the second leaf. You need a dab of glue to get you started. You need your piece of green paper. Holding that strip in your right hand. Well, I'm right-handed, so this is how I'm doing it, but if you're left-handed, just use your more dominant hand. Your wire in your left, the paper in the right. Hold your paper at an angle. You want to cover the top of the wire. Make sure that that is secure. That way the tip of the wire is not visible. All right? Fold that down and then firmly, yet without using too much of pressure, glue a tiny bit of glue on the wire. You're going to turn that wire while holding that paper at an angle and make sure that you cover the rest of it. All right? The glue that we've used on the wire should help keep everything nice and secure. Right till the end, go a little below, and there you have it. You want this to be nice and tight. You don't want it to be loose, because loose paper is quite unsightly when it's all put together. Similarly, for the 5 petals for each flower, you're going to need 5 pieces of wire. And just like we did for the leaves, we're going to continue for the petals. Now on to making the actual flower. With the broader end to the top, every template that actually is a little different. You'll notice that I've got the word top print on the side that's actually meant to point to the top. So you know that this is the end that's meant to face the top, which means your wire will start at that tip and run exactly down the center and extend a little below the wire. When you're cutting out your templates, or rather your leaves and petals from the template using your crepe paper, remember to cut along the grain. You don't want to go across, but the top end of your leaves and petals should, and the bottom end should be in line with the grain of the paper, right? Okay, now here's how I line my leaves. Oops. I'm going to take a little dab of glue, run that along the length of the wire that's going to actually make contact with the leaf. You can gauge more or less how much that'll be. No, I'm going to need a little more. Again, just a little bit goes a long way. And right down the center, we're going to place that wire. Press that down to make sure it's nicely stuck, and leave it aside to dry. We're going to do the same thing for all the leaves and the petals for the flowers we're making. Okay. When I normally do this, I use a little piece of paper like this, again cut out to the template, size of the template, or I could use just a bunch of artificial stamen. I'm going to show you the way that I do it with a piece of paper, and then again I'll show you another flower where I just put the center together a little differently. The petals and the leaves will go on the same way. Okay. So now with this strip of paper, I'm going to cut a little fringe on one side while leaving some amount of it intact. You'll see what I mean. So going with the grain again on the long side, we're going to cut a nice thin even fringe, as thin as you can get. Notice we're just cutting right up to here. We've got this little piece that's still intact. That's what's going to secure this little fringe onto the wire for the center of your flower, and keep cutting. There we are, all done. Okay, now one length of the big wire and your plier. You're going to make a little loop on one side, all right? Just like that. And pinch that together. So what you're left with is like a little bit of a loop at one end of the wire. That's going to help everything stay on, because if we just leave it the way it is, the chances are when we tie everything together, everything will just slip off. We don't want that happening, so we make a little loop just to make sure everything stays where it's meant to be. Now, we eventually will cover this wire as well, not just yet. We're going to assemble the flower, and whatever's left, that's what's going to be wrapped up. So you take your piece of wire, you take that little bit of paper that you've cut, okay? Just a tiny bit of glue down this side. Tiny, tiny bit. And we're going to wrap it around this piece of wire, just like this. And there you have it, a nice little center for the flower. You've got your center. Let's start with the leaves. You want your center to appear just a tiny bit below where the petal kind of starts to taper. All right. Now you want the right side of your petal facing up, just like we've done here. Take your piece of thread, and what you're going to do is secure that end. Yeah. Nice and tight. Now this bit takes a little getting used to. It needs to be tied so that the petal in itself doesn't fall off. And a little knot. Let's look at how we're going to tie that knot again. Okay. Just a little loop like this around the petal and pull. Once more. Okay. A little loop around the flower and pull. Similarly, we're going to attach the other petals. Pretty close. It's okay to bend these a little. Remember, we've got that wire there, so it should be easy to pull, kind of move them into shape. And we continue. You want the petals rather, to be fairly close to one another, just overlapping maybe a tiny bit. We can always slightly reposition them. We're going to loop the thread around a few times. Then there's that knot. Oops. Okay, let's look at how we get that knot together again. Okay, you wrap the thread around your fingers, you turn your wrist around, the loop around the petals, and pull. On to the next one. maintaining the same height. We're going to tie that nice and secure. Don't worry about the thread, what color the thread is, because none of that's going to be visible once we're done. We're just trying to make sure that everything's nice and secure. Alright, so the last knot. And when you're done with that, you can actually snip that off. You're not going to need it any longer. Now, that's what you're going to be left with. Move the petals around so that they sort of form a fairly round flower-shaped shape, for lack of a better word, right? You're going to bend the wire on the inside like a little cup, all right? And then where that petal starts tapering, you're going to bend it outwards, just like that. And the fifth one. So while bending your wire, you want to make sure the wire that your petals are attached to, you want to make sure you get a little bit of a cup shape going on the inside. Yeah, like so, like a little goblet. Okay, so now that we've got the flower all tied up and the petals molded, we're going to look at finishing it up. If you look on the back, you'll see how nicely finished everything is, except for the stem. For that, we're going to use the floral tape. Now you get floral tapes on rolls like this, and while you can use it all just the way it is, I find what helps with the finish is to thin the width down into half. To do that, all you need to do is simply wrap this around your fingers like this. Alright, cut a piece of it off, slip it all off your fingers in that same roll, and cut in half. There you go. Now, just like we did cover the wires, we're going to look at how we can use floral tape to do that. Now, floral tape sticks on itself, which is good. It eliminates the need for glue and holds everything together firmly. Pretty much nothing comes loose if done right. We're going to do this a little differently like we did for the wires, because we don't have just a little tip, a clean tip like this to wrap over like we did when we were wrapping the single pieces of wire down. So we're going to again hold the tape in your right hand, the flower and the stem in your left, hold that bit down and angle your tape upwards. We're going to start a little lower than where we actually need to. Roll that up right till the top so that all that thread is covered. Okay, spin that round once or twice and then angle your tape downwards. While you're rolling, make sure you get a little stretch out of it, because that's what activates the gluey bits on this tape. Yeah. And you keep overlapping the edges of it so that everything's nice and covered. Look at that. And you keep going till you reach the end. There you go. Your stalk's all nice and finished up now. But we're not done. We're going to add the leaves now. For the leaves, all you do is simply bend it to take whatever shape or form you need. You've got the wire, so that'll hold it in position. Look at where you'd like to place the leaf, a little higher, a little lower, it's all up to you. Again, take your tape again like we did the first time. Start a little lower than you'd want to. Go upwards till you reach the base of the leaf. Okay, spin that around a couple of times. Angle your tape downwards. Remember, you've got to keep stretching that tape as you work with it. And reach a little below than where that wire ends. And rip that off. Finish that by tucking everything nicely in together. Okay. Second leaf, we're going to do the same. Again, I'm going to position that just a little bit lower maybe. Okay. You can add more leaves to the stalk if you want to, but two is just fine by itself. Remember, you can also have stalks without leaves or with just the one leaf if you want to make like a whole bunch of them and put them in a vase. It's all up to you. Have fun with it. That's what's most important. There you have it. A beautiful buttercup. Okay, so if you want to make this buttercup just using artificial stamen rather than that fringed center, you can do that as well. You cut out your wire for the stem as before, you cut your petals, cut out the wires, attach them to the petals after wrapping them just like we did for this one. I'm just going to show you how to really quickly assemble that, right? So you're going to grab a handful of these stamen. I've got ones that are super fine, just like that. They're a really pale yellow and quite pretty when they're all put together, right? Just a bunch of, in this case, I've got about 10 strands. I'm going to double them up just like that, more or less the same height, but a little, if they're a little bit off in terms of height, it really doesn't matter. Again, this wire has been bent, the tip of this wire, one tip of this wire has been bent to form a loop, and you're going to put that in there, all right? Right in between those little artificial stamen. You're going to take your thread and tie it really nice, tight and secure. When tying, I find it helps to go up and down the length a little. That way you're kind of wrapping it a little more secure. Nothing's going to slip off. A couple of knots, just like we did the previous time. Okay, so once you've got the stamens tied up to your stem, I'm going to show you how to mold your petals before you actually tie it all together. You're going to bend your petal right at the base outwards and then using your thumb upwards. What you're aiming for is this little cup-like form. Okay, at the tip outwards and then using your thumb upwards. Then, like we did before, you're simply going to tie your petals to the center. Let's go through that really quick again. Alright, now just adjust the position of your petals and you're going to bend them outwards like we did before. Just like we did before. There you go. You've got the stamens as your center. You don't want big gaping holes in the middle over here, so you can always smush these petals closer together. This is mainly one of the reasons why I prefer molding my petals after they're tied. That way there's not as much of a gap. But you could always do what works better for you. There you go. And like I said before, you can also choose to use the whole length of tape, and that's what I'll show you this time around. Again, the same way. So you try out both, see what works better for you. There you have it. That's the second buttercup. Okay, now all that's left is to attach the leaves, or if you're putting them together, attach them to the same stalk like we did with the leaves, and you've got a little spray. Look how pretty they look. Now, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to press like and subscribe for all our upcoming video tutorials on different flowers. Thank you for watching.